Brand new polling, Jenna, ahead of tonight's State of the Union address, signaling trouble for the president as the Wall Street Journal NBC poll echoes our own Fox polls, finding that more than half of Americans surveyed disapprove of the president's job performance, with nearly 6 in 10 saying they are uncertain, worried, or pessimistic about the remainder of his presidency, leading the Wall Street Journal to write, quote, "Since the rise of modern polling in the 1930s, only George W. Bush has begun his 6th year in the White House on rockier ground than Mr. Obama." Joining us now, Ellison Barber, a writer at the Washington Free Beacon. It occurred to me that, a big part of the reason George W. Bush was so unpopular was because the country was embroiled in 2 wars at the time his 6th year in office began. The Iraq War has ended. The Afghan War is winding down. President Obama should be, accruing some of the benefits of that. And still, those poll numbers are pretty low for him.
Right. In theory, he should. But I think that it makes sense that people are pessimistic right now, because if you consistently look at polls, the issue that people care most about is the economy. And no matter how the White House tries to spin it, we still have 6.7% unemployment. And since the recession, where Americans lost $14 trillion in wealth, they've only gained back half of that. There was a study put out by the Federal Reserve of St. Louis back in May, and they said that Americans had only gained 45% of the wealth that they lost before the recession, and so they don't have the spending power to boost up the economy. So while the White House tries to spin it as we've gained this many jobs this month, or every little other tiny economic thing, at the end of the day, you still have a very big gap in how people have been doing since they've been under this president, and that's sort of why you see people being pessimistic.
And so with the economy, the big worry, the president is talking about income inequality, for instance, and trying to raise the minimum wage.
Right. That is a small cover. That's really not, this morning, one of the things that he put out was an executive order to raise the minimum wage to $10.10. That's not really anything that changes.
Federal jobs.
Right. Federal job wages. That's not really anything that changes or creates jobs. It just ups the minimum wage. So the problem that people are still worried about is the fact that we don't have enough jobs. And that doesn't really do anything to address that problem that people are worried about.
And I have to think that that's going to be a very tiny percentage of the workforce. I mean, the number of people involved in federal projects who are earning minimum wage, I would think, would be fairly small. I mean, maybe the guy mixing, some junior associate mixing cement on a highway project.
Right. It is going to be a small percentage, but it's a way to make the public think that you've been doing something, and hopefully that bolsters up those low poll numbers that you had. But there are also going to be issues with the fact of that so much of what he's planning on laying out in the State of the Union has to do with executive orders, and that's something that you're going to see a lot of criticism and pushback from Republicans.
And even that 6.7% unemployment rate that you were talking about, that number isn't even real. The last time around, you had 5 times as many people leaving the workforce because apparently they just cannot find jobs as you had people get jobs. So that takes down the labor force participation rate. You get a better unemployment number because of it.
Right, and not to mention how many people within that employment number, too, are underemployed. There's a whole lot of different reasons why that number is not, in my opinion at least, is never really a good indicator of economic strength. And that's why I point back to the wealth gain since the recession, because that's where you see people putting money back into the economy and having the spending power to actually boost up the economy. And we haven't had success in that area.
The White House numbers are pretty low. Congress's numbers are even lower. But if the two would work together to actually get something done, you might see both of their numbers
Right,
improve.
you would, and that's the problem with the president saying that his plan is going to be to issue executive orders, because that's violating what's the take care clause, which interestingly, that's also the clause that lines out that each year the president should come and give the State of the Union address before Congress. And I sort of think of that as a friendly reminder that that speech is not supposed to be something where you're enacting legislation, that your role is to just enforce it. So you're going to see more problems with that. But that, I think, is going to kind of really create a stronger rift between the Republicans and the president.
The framers of the Constitution didn't want a king. They didn't want one person deciding what the law of the land should be. That's why we have a Congress.
And the premise, though, too, that the administration tends to operate on is they point to the House and they say that's why we're not able to get things done, because they're stonewalling us and we were elected by the people. What we're trying to implement are things that the people want. But they seem to forget that those people in the House that are stonewalling them were also elected by the people. So they're carrying out things that their constituents wanted as well. And so there's a very interesting premise that the administration operates on when they kind of try and blame Congress for what's not being passed through, because those are people that are trying to do the exact same thing that they say they are doing.
Trying to represent their constituents. Ellison Barber from the Washington Free Beacon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.